Michael Bay's live-action Transformers films are a cornerstone of online film discussion. So ubiquitous are these films that just mentioning them can be used as shorthand for big-budget, schlocky summer blockbusters in general. Often referred to hyperbolically and sincerely as everything that's wrong with Hollywood, these films have a reputation for being terrible and are a staple of genuine film critique and online angry reviews for the past decade and a half now. These films aren't even popular with Transformers fans. Most of the fans complained about the designs, calling them overly detailed and cluttered and messy. And over the 2.5-hour runtime of most of these films, the Transformers themselves don't even get enough screen time, with most of the runtime being devoted to obnoxious human characters and their hijinks. Personally, I'm still really nostalgic for the first film. I distinctly remember when I first saw the trailer for it and thought it was going to be some kind of over-the-top Independence Day-style alien invasion movie, where there just so happened to be aliens on the side of the good guys as well, until the trailer revealed that it was in fact a Transformers movie and it all made sense. I distinctly remember that theater experience of seeing it for the first time, and as I said in the previous video, it's solely responsible for my interest in Transformers expanding beyond Armada and into the rest of the franchise. But even back in the day, I remembered having some problems with it, particularly how the cinematography makes the action hard to follow. The camera shakes violently and lots of the action shots happen just barely out of frame where it's hard to tell what's even going on. Lots of flaws that went over my head as a kid are soberingly apparent watching it again 15 years later, such as the post-9/11 in-your-face patriotism, the occasional offensive stereotype, and, well, Okay, small rant here. Back when I first saw this, I had no problem with Shia LaBeouf as our protagonist. At that point in his career, he was the perfect age for the role and was easily identifiable from the Disney Channel and movies like Holes. The writing was relatable for the teenage boy audience, and this was also a point in his career where he was perceived as innocent and generally well-liked. In fact, it could be argued that his role in the Transformers films was partially responsible for his career suicide, as playing the protagonist of one of the highest-grossing film franchises of all time certainly put him in the spotlight a lot of the time. But in hindsight, his character is awful. Sam Witwicky is a microcosm of male gaze in Hollywood films. In Dan Olson's old video about ludonarrative dissonance, he explains how Michaela, played by Megan Fox, would have actually worked better as a protagonist due to being more confident, competent, and having some level of compatibility with the Transformers just by virtue of being a mechanic, as a way to describe what it's like when a film's writing doesn't agree with the message the camera is showing us. I'm also, in fact, guilty of having a negative and derogatory perception of Megan Fox's character over the years because of how the camera just treats her like a sex object, and the message the audience ends up taking away is that she's unnecessary and irrelevant. But to play devil's advocate for the film one more time, there's still a lot of parts I enjoy to this day. The film has a very expensive but appealing frame-by-frame color grade. It features one of the final performances of the late Bernie Mac.
Let me tell you something, son. A driver don't pick the car. The car pick the driver. It's a mystical bond between man and machine.
And it was the first of a long line of new adaptations where Peter Cullen would reprise his role as Optimus Prime. But if there's anything that's as a well-worn discussion as these films on the internet, it's film video game adaptations, and boy does the first Transformers movie have an interesting one. Movie-based adaptations have been the low-hanging fruit of video game discussion literally as long as video games have existed. There's plenty of good ones out there, such as many various adaptations of The Lord of the Rings or Star Wars. Fellow YouTuber Technical Cake Mix did a great review on the Godfather adaptation video game. But it's one thing to just make a game off of a film franchise decades after it's come out, but when you're specifically making a video game as a tie-in product to a movie, it's a distinctly different type of product. The development window is no doubt very, very small, and things like a story roadmap and certain assets have to be available, so the film has to be late in production, and yet the game still has to release before the film does, or in tandem with the film. The game comes to us from Traveller's Tales, a UK-based studio that almost exclusively makes licensed games for kids. Many adaptations of Disney movies, including Toy Story and Bug's Life, and every single LEGO game after the first LEGO Star Wars, including Bionicle Heroes. The game was released for nearly everything, the PS2, the Wii, the PS3, the Xbox 360, and PC. An entirely different game was developed for the PSP by Savage Entertainment, and another separate version for the DS made by Vicarious Visions. I can't find anything related to sales data, but I'm under the impression the game at least sold very well, the PS2 version receiving a second printing as a greatest hits title. While it got pretty mixed and even poor reception from critics with a lot of 5 and 6s out of 10s and 55s out of 100s, this game undoubtedly has a loyal fan base even with a modding community on PC that's still active to this day. The visuals are serviceable, with the models looking pretty faithful to the film. There is the occasional dip in frame rate or screen tearing when there's a lot of enemies on screen or a lot of particle effects from enemies breaking apart when defeated. The aspect of the visuals that doesn't work, however, is the pre-rendered cutscenes. They're hilariously bad, and the robot movements are floaty and more cartoonish than anything in the actual cartoons. Like, I didn't cut that. That's actually how it looks in-game. The sound design is fine, I guess. There isn't anything particularly memorable about the soundtrack or the sound effects. Peter Cullen voices Optimus Prime, and Frank Welker returns for the first time since G1 to play Megatron, even though he was played by Hugo Weaving in the film.
And so as I started thinking, I thought, well, no, I need more. Like, it's painful almost to listen to it. You either hate this voice or you like it, but when you go into a room, you're gonna turn around when you hear it.
It's hard to describe exactly what they went for with the gameplay. It's some weird amalgamation of GTA meets a Godzilla game. You have 2 separate campaigns, each for the Autobots and Decepticons. Each chapter drops you into a hub world where you're free to roam around and explore, and also destroy things. You can complete certain challenges like reaching a certain top speed or achieving a certain amount of destruction that allows you to unlock bonus content. I've done that on the PS2 version before, but I will not be doing that again here. Each mission is unlocked one at a time and can be replayed at any time from certain locations on the map. During each mission, you'll have a chance to play as a different character, even if there's one character designated for that specific hub world. The controls are an interesting choice. The movement feels fine, with the exception that the camera shakes violently every time your character takes a step, which can be extremely disorienting during certain parts of the game. Characters can jump, climb walls and buildings, and perform a dodge roll, and of course transform into their alt mode. On this playthrough, I was shocked at how slippery and erratic the vehicle physics are. I feel like I remember them controlling a lot better when I played this game 15 years ago. The combat in this game is much more like a beat-em-up than any of the other games in this series. Each character has 2 ranged attacks, light and heavy, bound to R1 and R2 respectively, which are swapped from the PS2 to the PS3. Probably due to the fact that the PS3 tried to make its lower shoulder buttons more like the triggers the Xbox uses, something that becomes infuriatingly inconsistent across titles on the PS3. You have a melee combo by mashing square, you can block with L2 and perform a unique parry move as well. Finally, you can pick up objects or even downed enemies with the circle button and throw them for large amounts of damage or for staggering enemies. How the game handles combat is this. Different types of enemies are only susceptible to damage from certain types of attacks. Only the very most basic enemies can be gunned down by your ranged attacks. Most enemies can only be damaged with melee, and enemies that are immune to melee have one and exactly one answer for dealing with them that works: picking up something and throwing it at them, meaning that every and all encounters devolve into the same basic loop of throwing an object at an enemy, knocking them down with a melee attack, and if you're lucky, picking them up and throwing them as well. The inconsistency in logic here is incredible too. Like, a fully automatic space grenade launcher won't hurt these robots, but if you throw a lamppost at him, incapacitated. This results in a lot of repetition and forces the level designers to find other ways to draw out boss fights, such as making the boss randomly run away for no reason, forcing you into your alt mode to chase him down and maybe beat up some regular enemies along the way before beginning the next phase of the fight. I would say as a result of this game has the worst alt mode implementation of any of the games we'll be looking at as part of this series, but this also reveals the game's most noticeable flaw. Its basic gameplay loop is fun, but extremely repetitive and drawn out with very obvious padding. This doesn't become a problem on the Autobot campaign, but the Decepticon campaign is longer and more difficult, and when you combine that with the repetition, makes the last act of it excruciating to play. You can easily complete each campaign in about an hour and a half to 2 hours, but I would highly recommend taking a break after the Autobot campaign as to not get too burnt out. We begin with Bumblebee arriving on Earth. He selects his alt mode and begins scouting in search for clues to the location of the Allspark. Right away, he finds out he wasn't the only Cybertronian to land, as several Decepticon drones come to engage him. We'll be seeing a lot of these drones throughout the game. They're actually named characters who had toys made of them back in the day, too. These small forklift guys are some of the only ones you can blow up with your ranged weapons, so you should be able to take them out without much effort. The next enemy we encounter is the purple guy who transforms into a pickup truck whose toy was named Dropkick. He can block your ranged attacks, so it might be time to move in for melee already. We get our first instance of picking up a downed enemy and throwing them, which is just one of the most fun things you can do in this game. Next, we have to travel to the suburbs to locate the owner of the glasses that contain the location of the Allspark. We find Sam Witwicky at his residence, but some more Decepticon drones arrive too, so we need to take them out to prevent them from reporting the location of the glasses. We partake in a short chase mission where we hunt down the remaining drones, and we end up at Bobby Bolivia's used car lot, where shortly afterwards, Sam and his father arrive to look for his first car. Funny enough, this scene here in the game doesn't involve Bumblebee just blowing up all of the windows on all of the other cars in the parking lot. Sam just says, "I want this one," and his dad's like, "Sure." The next day, we see Sam and Michaela leaving school together, and bad news, Barricade has shown up and Sam is in danger. Thus begins the first long and drawn-out boss fight in the game. Barricade has a cycle where he'll flail these Morningstar-style weapons from his hands and slowly walk towards us. He's completely immune to melee damage in this phase, and if we touch him, we're just going to be sent flying. We throw something at him and stun him, causing him to break that stance and try to rush us, so now we can beat him back with a regular melee combo. Next, we have to race him to another predetermined location on the map to begin the next phase of the fight. Even though we can see him driving on the overworld and even continue to beat him up, the game only cares if we arrive at the next destination before he does. We repeat the process at the ballpark area, and then again in this factory compound. There's an impressive amount of destructibility in this environment, including dozens of exploding canisters and some concrete silos that crumble really nicely. We beat up Barricade using the old reliable strategy, and rescue Sam. Now that we've done so, we can hail the rest of the Autobots to Earth, but in order to do that, we need to disable a jamming signal set up by the Decepticons. This mission requires going to a bunch of various different locations throughout the city map and destroying a bunch of electronics that the Decepticons have hacked with their jamming signal. It's a nice little break from all the combat. That evening, the rest of the Autobots arrive on Earth, and we move on to our second main chapter. Trouble starts almost immediately as Sector 7 from the movie, given no proper introduction in the game, is already tracking and following the Autobots. Prime orders Jazz to lure Sector 7 away from the rest of the team. This hub world has missions where you play as all of the other Autobots except for Ratchet, who is non-playable in this game. Jazz is extremely fun to play as. He's fast and agile even in his robot mode, and his alt mode has a great car sound effect, especially compared to Bumblebee's. This is sort of a smash and grab mission where Jazz has to drive through various different checkpoints throughout the city and cause distractions by blowing up various key areas that will cause a lot of damage. His primary attack is sort of a burst fire machine gun, and his secondary is sort of like these concussion grenades, which get the job done. Unfortunately, Jazz gets cornered, and so it's up to Ironhide to get him out of a jam. Ironhide was always one of the coolest Autobot designs from the live-action movie. He's much bigger and bulkier than Jazz, and his movement can be especially disorienting due to the shaking camera. I'm pretty sure this film had some kind of advertising agreement with General Motors when it came out, because Bumblebee turns into a Chevy Camaro, Jazz a Pontiac Solstice, and Ironhide a GMC Topkick. But in all honesty, it seems more like a weird flex than genuine advertising. When Bumblebee changes his alt mode, he turns into the new 2008 Chevy Camaro, which was still a concept car at the time. Jazz turns into a Pontiac Solstice Coupe, which did not exist at the time, and when they finally made them, they looked completely different. And the type of configuration of GMC Topkick that Ironhide is would have cost you so much money, you would just be better off buying an actual supercar at that point. Ironhide's primary attack is a rotating machine gun, and his secondary is the explosive cannons we see him use in the movie. Even when he uses an aerial ground pound attack, he uses his cannon instead, which is pretty cool. His primary fire is even powerful enough to take out the small car drone enemies with ease. We do encounter a tougher enemy here that turns into a tow truck. This guy will spin around his crane arm from the tow truck in an attack similar to what Barricade did earlier, so once again we have to resort to throwing stuff at him to knock him down. Similar to the previous mission, we just have to go to various places around the map once Jazz gets cornered by enemies and draw their aggro towards us so he can escape. The final encounter sees us up against a new type of drone that transforms into a concrete mixer. He's a hefty boy and basically immune to all damage except from hitting the ground after being thrown, so you need to knock him down and pick him up to do any real damage to him. Sector 7 ends up cornering Bumblebee and disabling him, so it's up to Optimus Prime to try to rescue him. Prime is definitely fun to play as, but this mission doesn't really showcase his abilities very well at all. Since it's been such a long time since I played this, I honestly forgot what the objective of this mission is. I don't know if you're trying to damage the helicopter that's carrying Bumblebee or just follow it around the map until it decides to leave, but it feels like it takes forever and you're redundantly circling the city for a really long time before the helicopter finally leaves the map with him and ends the mission. The final section of this chapter is new content not seen in the movie. They actually added Shockwave to the game as a boss fight, and he's without a doubt the most interesting and challenging boss in the Autobot campaign. He starts out in cannon mode, destroying the city around him. There's a percentage meter on the side of the screen to track how much of the city is left. When you try to get close to him, he'll block you with a shield, so you need to throw something at him, but he'll be shooting missiles at you in the process. He can take out a lot of your health very quickly if you're not careful, and the amount of destruction he causes can make it hard to find something to grab and throw at him. You have to take out about 2 of his health segments before he transforms, and you know what? They did a really good job on his design. It's very G1 style and doesn't look anything like how he would look in Dark of the Moon. Now that he's in robot mode, this also becomes a more straightforward fight, but he can still be pretty tough. Also, nice reference there. You have to repeat the process of chasing him down and fighting him about 2 or 3 more times. Really excellent fight, and personally a highlight of the Autobot campaign for me. Chapter 3 picks up at the part of the film where Sector 7 has taken Sam, Michaela, and Bumblebee to the Hoover Dam where the Allspark and Megatron remain frozen. Bumblebee breaks out of captivity and starts trying to get past Sector 7 security to find Sam and the Allspark. This is without a doubt my least favorite part of the Autobot campaign. These missions are such a pain. To get to the command center, you need to break through the security door, and then this drone tank thing runs out of the room, so you need to track it down all across the level to destroy it, and then repeat the process like 3 more times, and it gets really annoying because every single time you beat the drone, you have to backtrack all the way to the control room again, over and over again. The next mission has you blowing up these cooling fans that I guess are supposed to be part of the system powering the generators that keep the Allspark contained. So you have to drive down these long corridors and blow up the cooling fans, only to have to outrun an explosion and try not to run over all the debris on both sides of the corridor as you're escaping. It's a little tedious, but the right amount of challenge. The next mission has you climbing up the side of these structures to destroy these canisters at the top, and no matter where you throw them, they will always cause an explosion that knocks you off the structure, meaning you have to climb all the way up from the ground each and every time you do this. And now, for my most hated mission in the Autobot campaign, and my second most hated in the entire game. You need to destroy the clamps holding the Allspark in place, and then it starts to shrink down to the size where we can carry it. Its power starts turning all types of machinery into Cybertronians, so we end up with a bunch of these weird spider things coming at us from all directions that can be pretty easily shot down with our regular weapons. The problem is, Megatron starts to unfreeze and starts shooting us with his fusion cannon. You just need to survive until the Allspark cube is shrunken down enough. Meanwhile, you're constantly getting shot by Sector 7, the spiders, and Megatron is constantly cheap-shotting you, and there is nothing you can do about it. You cannot block and dodge his attack. You simply have to keep going and hope you get some health back from the enemies. It sucks, and it took me about 4 tries on this playthrough. The final Autobot chapter takes place in the city as they're trying to keep the Allspark safe from the Decepticons. Right away, Bumblebee gets cornered by all the spider drone things that are just everywhere now, apparently, because bringing the Allspark into a crowded city surrounded by technology was a great idea. We take control of Ironhide for this mission, and all you have to do is destroy 100 of these little spider drones. It's simple and mindless fun, and it takes about a minute to complete. Next is another Jazz mission, in which we have to take out both Starscream and Blackout. Pretty badass for Jazz, if I do say so. This is another mission that I feel like the challenge is just right, but there is some jankiness you'll have to worry about. The first phase of the fight has Starscream making passes at you in his jet mode. Once he transforms back, just throw something at him. In spite of how cartoonishly small Jazz is compared to him, your melee attacks will absolutely savage him. Once his health bar is gone, he'll run away, and a drone who also transforms into a jet will fly in. I believe the name for the toy for this one was Dreadwing. He has a nasty flamethrower attack and can randomly take off into his alt mode and drop bombs on you, which are very difficult to dodge. After you deal with him, Blackout should fly in. You can actually damage Blackout with your ranged attacks while he's still in his helicopter mode on the way in. Once he lands, you should have an easy time beating him back with your melee attacks, but you'll have to be very careful. If he goes into his blocking animation, he'll most likely counterattack with a charging attack. Once he retreats, blow up another Dreadwing, and get ready for a fight with both of them at the same time. Make sure you use your free damage on Blackout's alt mode. This fight can actually end prematurely if you take out Starscream first, since apparently that's the trigger that's required to say you've beaten it. Now Jazz is in trouble because Brawl has arrived on scene, so we need to switch back over to Ironhide to help him out. We arrive to find out Jazz has already been killed by Brawl, a less dignified death than him going out like a boss against Megatron and getting ripped in half like in the movie. The fight against Brawl is pretty straightforward. Beat him back with your physical attacks and watch out for him blocking. The same usual boss formula we're used to repeats here again. After his health runs out, we'll have to blow through some drone enemies to go find him again in a new location on the map. The only thing to be cautious of on approach to the new location is Brawl's tank cannon. The next mission has us taking back control of Bumblebee for the final time, as we have our decisive rematch against Barricade. See, in the film, they just forgot about Barricade, or he was cut from the final battle on the cutting room floor. The last time we see him is on the highway chase, where Prime takes out Bone Crusher, and so that forced them to shoehorn him into Dark of the Moon, where he is unceremoniously killed off without much screen time in that movie. But because they already had the asset for the Barricade fight in the game, might as well reuse that and have you fight him in the final battle and properly finish him off, rather than making a whole other fight for Bone Crusher, which they didn't have the time or the money to do, or a way to make the highway level its own level.
Oh, another cute little reference. We actually nearly take a death in this fight as Barricade gets us backed into a corner with his flail thing, and combine that with lots of exploding cars damaging us back to back, and it ended up being a really close fight. But we ended up winning by throwing him to his death once again. All that remains is the final battle against Megatron in the park area. Megatron's AI pattern changes in each phase of the fight. He will copy an attack pattern from a tough enemy throughout the game. He starts out with this unblockable shoulder charge copied from an enemy we technically haven't met yet and won't until the Decepticon campaign. The timing for throwing something at him in this phase is very tricky, since if you throw it into him while he's charging, he'll just shrug it off. Then he'll transform into his alt mode and fly away, making passes at you firing missiles. The next phase, he will swing around his own flail weapon like he had in the film, similar to Barricade. This phase is much easier. The third phase, he'll copy the flamethrower weapon from Dreadwing, and this one is pretty easy to avoid getting hit by since he doesn't charge at you with them very quickly. The fourth and final phase, he will randomly alternate between a different attack pattern we've previously mentioned, with the shoulder charge being the most dangerous. Overall, not a terribly difficult fight, but a satisfying conclusion to this part of the game with some decent music to go with it. Prime shoves the Allspark into Megatron, finishing him off for good, and we get an honestly really beautiful final scene of the Autobots taking in their new home.
Overall, the Autobot campaign is a nice, small, digestible chunk. It took me about 90 minutes to complete on this run, and while it's lacking in variety and not particularly challenging, it's fine overall, even if that one section, the Hoover Dam, was excruciating. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the Decepticon campaign.
We begin, as the film did, with Blackout in the desert, shooting down the Black Hawk helicopter 4500X and taking it on as his alt mode. We then travel to Soxen military base in Qatar to hack the military network and find out information on where Megatron and the Allspark are being kept. Blackout is probably without a doubt the most fun Decepticon to play as. Mostly here in this first chapter in the desert, as opposed to later in the game, but we'll get to that. His weapons feel powerful, and his helicopter alt mode moves extremely quick. His secondary weapon is reminiscent to his in the film that created those massive shockwaves. The first mission simply requires you to destroy everything in sight within the time limit, which is pretty easy and lots of mindless fun. For the next mission, we have to deploy Scorponok to go track down a bunch of APCs trying to escape with the data. This mission is really what convinces me that the campaign for the Decepticons is meant to be played after the Autobot one. The time you're allowed to complete this objective is very tight, and I actually had one failed attempt by going after the vehicles in the wrong order. The third mission has us going to 5 different locations around the base and destroying the communications buildings to try to steal the data, as Blackout does in the film. After you break open the buildings, you have to pick up the computer servers and then throw them when you're done. The final mission gives us 6 minutes to destroy 20 F-22 Raptors, which seems like a hilarious and impossible task for a helicopter, but I guess we're also an alien helicopter, so whatever. There are several other vehicles in the air that will try to stop you, including Ospreys, other Blackhawks, and stealth bombers of all things. Keep a close eye on your health throughout this, and don't take your eyes off the jets for too long, and you should be fine. Now that Blackout has the data from the military network, it's time to hunt down the clues to the location of the Allspark and Megatron. In the next chapter, we take control of Barricade in search of, Ladies Man 217 in the suburbs. Right away, we encounter some Autobot drones, and it's time to lay down the smackdown. Barricade is surprisingly fun to play as and has a really brutal melee attack. At the end of this encounter, we end up fighting the tow truck enemy again, who I'm pretty sure is named Long Arm, and his toy looks nothing like he does in the game.
This ball is crushed. Man, what a shot for Bellinger.
Apparently here in the game, Frenzy's espionage did not go well for him, and he's been captured by Sector 7. So we need to go to various places around the city map at night and destroy everything around us until the hidden Sector 7 vehicle drives away to the next location. Basically the same locations from the Bumblebee mission with the jamming signal, but we're destroying everything in sight this time. We rescue Frenzy and leave the city a smoldering mess. Next is the inevitable fight with Bumblebee, and this is where things get interesting. Bumblebee has a unique gimmick in this fight where he will stand still and send out this shockwave attack in all directions. It's very difficult to avoid, and you need to block until the final damage frame has passed. If you unblock too soon, you get sent flying. This dork ends up sending himself flying by blowing up a nearby building, so we get a chance to pick him up and throw him too. Much like the Shockwave fight, he destroys so much of the environment around him it can be difficult to find any objects to throw at him. When you go to the next location to continue the fight, you get cornered by a group of Autobot drones, and Bumblebee ends up getting away. We actually continued the fight with him in the next mission. The fight continues for another 3 or 4 phases, repeating the same pattern. You should be safe if you're patient with your blocking, and you slowly creep up to him in between each shockwave attack. The final phase has you back in the factory area, and immediately his shockwave attack will detonate all of the canisters around you, so you'll need to shrug off a lot of damage from that, and some regular enemies that join in during this phase as well. After this chapter, the continuity of the story changes permanently on this route, as Bumblebee is completely killed off. In Chapter 3 of the Decepticon campaign, we take control of Starscream in an attempt to mobilize the rest of the Decepticons and make their assault on the Hoover Dam to rescue Megatron. Just like Blackout, Starscream can be a lot of fun to control since his jet mode lets him take off and travel the map very quickly, even if the jet itself completely disregards the laws of physics in the process. You may notice on the map that your radar is completely obscured, so our first mission is to fly around the base and destroy the signal jammers. Starscream can kind of float in the air a little bit when he jumps using the thrusters on his back, and generally has pretty unique movement compared to anyone we've played as of yet. His weapons are taken right from the jet mode, a Vulcan machine gun and missiles. The next mission asks you to escort Bone Crusher as he makes his way off the base. They actually went through the effort of making a Bone Crusher model in-game, but you can never actually play as him or even fight against him. Bone Crusher will get stopped occasionally by traps they have laid down for him, so you'll have to blow up these electric devices so he can proceed. You may also get stopped by a rogue Autobot drone here and there who turns into a jet like Dreadwing. Once you get Bone Crusher through 3 or 4 of these checkpoints, He leaves the map and you complete the mission. The next mission requires us to shoot down 10 of these UAVs within 6 minutes. Just shooting it down isn't enough though, as you'll need to land and pick up the fuselage and throw it to actually destroy it. It's actually easy to forget about that, and you may have several of them lying in a heap on the ground, but you haven't actually made any progress yet. The final Starscream mission is a repeat of the one with Bone Crusher earlier, except you're escorting him and Brawl this time. It's basically the same, but slightly more challenging. You can actually go ahead further into the level and destroy some of these traps ahead of your allies to sequence break this a little bit and speed up the process. And now it's time for the final Decepticon chapter, and it's the part where the game really starts to overstay its welcome, and a lot of the jank becomes too hard to ignore. We start off as Barricade again, and we end up running into Jazz. So it's time for Jazz to get killed off by yet another different character. Great. The fight actually only has 2 rounds to it, so it's super easy. You beat him back the first time when he drives away, turning it into a timed chase where you have to pick up these tokens to increase your time limit. But after the second phase, he's already defeated. Next we take control of Scorponok again, which feels extremely awkward in the city. He can't burrow into the street either, he needs to be on soft ground to do that. Once we reach the Central Park area, all we have to do is destroy a bunch of those spider things created by the Allspark, which is easy enough. Right as Sam and Michaela are about to give the Allspark to Scorponok, Ironhide steps in and saves them. So next we have to take control of Blackout to destroy Ironhide. Anyone who's played this game knows that this is the hardest mission in the entire game, and by far my most hated. Holy shit, this fight is awful. Ironhide will stand in the center of the park area and with a protective shield around him, and if you get near him, he'll blast the shit out of you with his cannons. You have to defeat a huge wave of drones before he makes himself vulnerable again. But once he's taken enough damage and goes into that defensive mode again, it doesn't matter where he is where he decides to do that, he'll start blasting you again and you can lose a third or half of your health from this potentially. Each wave of enemies gets tougher and tougher, and there are dozens of helicopters, tanks, and other military vehicles shooting at you as well. The other annoying part is Blackout's stun animation where he floats backwards on his helicopter blades. Sometimes you end up really far away from where you initially got hit. No matter what you do, do not transform into your alt mode. I guess it's some kind of unspoken rule in this game where you take more damage in your alt mode, so you can be easily killed very quickly by all the enemies in the area. The only saving grace in this mission is that Blackout has very strong weapons, so a lot of the smaller drones can be killed very easily. But otherwise, this mission is excruciating and took me at least 4 tries on this playthrough. Finally, we get to take control of Megatron for the finale. This is sort of your reward for playing through the entire game. Megatron is extremely overpowered, but that honestly does not make this mission fun. The first part of it just has you in search of the Allspark, blowing up the city within a certain time limit, and then a group of enemies will spawn in. Certain ones like Long Arm and the Concrete Mixer can still potentially give you trouble even as Megatron. As much as I'm glad they let you fight some regular enemies before they just throw you into the final battle against Prime, this section takes entirely way too long and has a cryptic ending where you need to climb to the top of this specific tall building within a short time frame to end the mission. Now for the final fight with Prime. It's not difficult, but it is extremely tedious. After each phase, you have to beat a wave of drones, and then you have to fly around the city with your map disabled to try to find him again in the next location, and if you run out of time, you fail the mission entirely, which can be really annoying. But after about 3 or so phases of chasing him around the city and repeating the same process, we are victorious. Megatron absorbs the Allspark, and the Decepticons reign supreme over their new creation.
The Decepticon campaign is really where the game's faults are the most painfully apparent. It's not terrible overall, but those last few chapters were just excruciating to get through, and it's where the game really started to overstay its welcome, which is not something I should be saying for a game that took in total about 3.5 hours to complete. I think the reception this game got back in the day was deserved, but at the same time, I understand why it has fans, and I had a lot of fun going back and replaying it for the first time in nearly 15 years. Even if its flaws are more apparent now than ever. I found myself feeling very nostalgic over the course of this project. I feel like Transformers has always been one of those like comfort food franchises I can always go to when the world feels like it's just gotten too complex and things have gotten too stressful, and I want to remember what it was like when the world was more simple and less stressful. And I know that's a sentiment a lot of people can easily share because it is a franchise based off of a toy line and therefore is inexorably tied to childhood, where things can be perceived as more simple and less complex and dreadful. But I feel like there's a little bit more to it than that. This movie came out when I was 14. I'm about to be 30. And it just really is interesting to put into perspective not only how much the world has changed, but how much I have changed and how my perception of the world has changed and how I look at things differently now than I did when this film was new. And that couldn't be more self-evident than how I assessed the film at the beginning of this video. I got this shirt at Dragon Con in 2009, and it doesn't admittedly fit very well anymore, and it's kind of faded, but overall, this game and this film are not very good, but I will still always look back on them fondly because of what it represents not only to who I am now, but to who I was back in the day when these were new. Now, for our next episode, as far as the Transformers film adaptations go, would you believe me if I said the worst film has the best game?